breathe underwater.
Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of Top Earner. Leroy has confronted Crystal. He wanted to know after his conversation with Big Al if Crystal had slept with Big Al. Because Big Al made it seem as though he did more than help her financially. And when Leroy confronted her, she struggled with what to say because she feared that if she told him the absolute truth about Big Al and Tony, that he would leave her. But she knew that she had to tell him something. She had to tell him something because he was insisting that she tell him. And then she worried that if she didn't tell him the truth, that Big Al would continue to put these stories in his head, and then maybe Tony would pop back up and put these stories in his head. So she struggled, but Leroy was insistent. He wouldn't let her get away. He wanted to know something he wanted to know right now. So Crystal, she told him. She told him about every single time that she had been with Big Al. She told him about the money and how she had spent it. She even went back and told him about Tony. And in telling him about Tony, she had to tell him about the friend that her girlfriend had that kissed her way back. So this just crushed Leroy because he thought that Crystal was the one. And in his heart, he still believed that. But he was hurting. The pain that he was feeling in his gut was something that he had never experienced. Yeah, he had seen all of the things that go on in the streets, and he wasn't naive to the lifestyle of people in the streets. He was one of those individuals, you know what I'm saying, the brief time that he was in the game doing the things with Big Al, right? But he had never stepped out on Crystal, never. He had never participated in any of that. To him, it was strictly business. Strictly business. But what he didn't factor was that how his involvement, his entry into the game was going to change her. And in that moment, he was crushed. And he stood up and he looked at her and he just turned and he walked out and didn't look back. He didn't have any money. He didn't have anything. So he went and he got in the car and he drove off. And when he drove off, he had no plans. He had no idea of what he wanted to do. But he knew that he didn't want to be there anymore. And he knew that he wanted revenge against Big Al. Now let's keep this in mind now. Just 2 days ago, a day ago, he had been released from prison. And he had made this transformation that made him closer to the Most High in a way that he had never experienced before. But this one incident that made him the victim, his receiving of that victimhood, made him abandon all of that. He abandoned all of what he had learned, all of what he saw, all of what he experienced. He abandoned all of that like that. And now he wanted his lick back. He wanted his lick back. And he knew that in order to get his lick back, he had to get back in the game. He had to get back in the game. But this time, his intentions were not to get back in the game to make money to pay bills. This time, his intention was to make money to destroy Big Al. He wanted Big Al to feel what he felt. That's what he wanted. He wanted Big Al to feel the hurt and the betrayal that he felt. Because he was going through it right now, and he considered Big Al to be the reason that he was hurting like this. And he wanted his lick back. So he drove and he drove for hours, and he decided, okay, I'm going to call Big Al, and I'm going to get back in. And so when he calls Big Al is unaware of what happened with him and Crystal. He has no idea that Leroy has walked out on her. So he tells him to come by the house so they can work things out. And as far as Big Al was concerned, they can pick up where they left off, which was great for Leroy from the standpoint that he didn't have to work his way back up. And plus, it meant that he would have some income immediately. He would be able to take care of himself, because right now he didn't want to go back to the house. He didn't want to look at Crystal. He didn't want anything to do with her right now at all. So Leroy went to pay Big Al that visit. He got everything straight, and he set him up in an apartment too. So Leroy is doing his thing. He's back in the game. He's making moves. He's picking up. He's moving things around. And guess who's watching? The police are watching. But this time, Leroy knows the game. He makes sure that the individuals that he's dealing with are not confidential informants. He's brutal. He does background check. He's doing all of those types of things, trying to find the right way to do wrong. And he's convinced himself that he has the formula. He's convinced himself that he has everything under control. But at the same time, he's understanding that his purpose in this game now is different. This is all about get back. He doesn't care about getting rich. That's just part of it. The money. He's putting the money up. He's stacking the money. And during this time of being all alone, after all of these months, he starts to miss Crystal. And he's heard, you know what I'm saying, that, she's still working. She started working again and all of these things. And she cut herself off from everybody that she used to hang around with. And people are talking about how she's not looking good because she's stressing. She's stressing. The man that she loves the most, the man that she was willing to let another man play in her body for, the man that she was willing to allow to go into the business and sell drugs, the man that she loved more than anybody in the world had walked out on her because she had made some bad decisions. See, she didn't factor in, she couldn't comprehend, she didn't understand that all of these things, these dominoes were set up by Leroy. But the decisions that she made were her own. So she accepted responsibility for it, and she calculated in her mind that losing Leroy was part of it. So she went on with her life, as hard as it was. And she regretted ever telling him that it was okay, because it cost her him. And she remembers being the most happiest with him before the money. So she wanted that happiness back. So she wanted nothing to do with the things that came into her life after Leroy started selling drugs. So Leroy's hearing about all of this. So he just drops by unannounced one day to pay her a visit. And they sat on her mom's porch drinking lemonade, and they just talked. They talked like they used to talk when they didn't have a lot of money. They talked about the things that they wanted to do and how much they missed each other. And Leroy looked at her and he told her, he said, "I'm sorry for walking out on you. I was angry and I was hurt." And she looked at him and she said, "I know I hurt you." But she said, "I watched you talk to the people that you hurt." And she said it was something different about you, something special about you when you were doing that. But when the tables were turned, she said, "What happened? Where did that person go?" And he looked at her and a tear rolled down his face and he couldn't answer. He couldn't answer her because the answer for him was too painful to say. It was too painful because the truth was he had abandoned everything that he learned because he was hurt, he was angry, and the devil had gotten under his skin. Plus, he had set on a course of revenge that he didn't want to let go. Even though he was sitting over there talking to Crystal about how sorry he was that he walked out on her and all of the things that led up to that and all of the things that happened after that to them as a couple, he still was blinded and wanted Big Al to suffer. He was still missing it. Again, like I said, it's easier, let me say easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to forgive. Because when you're asking somebody for forgiveness, it's one thing. But when they're asking you to forgive them, it's hard to stop the hurting that you feel in your chest, in your gut. And saying that I forgive you in that moment doesn't always take it away. It's not like the movies. It's not like a magical thing that happens. It's a process. And in that moment of his pain and anger, he resorted back to that childlike state. And he stormed away hurt. And in that, he hurt her. He couldn't see in that moment how much she needed him. He couldn't see that. And that's something that I talk about a lot. Let me say this real quick and I'm going to get right back to the story. That's something I talk about a lot to the guys in here because a lot of times when you're going through some things, you focus more on how it's making you feel as opposed to how it's making the other individual feel, right? And in doing that, sometimes if you're not on a certain level as far as consciousness and understanding and then all of the things that come with that, that hurt that you feel will lead you to making a decision that is counterproductive to what you need and the individual that you're dealing with at that particular time. What I've come to understand, and a lot of people in here that I talk to just don't get where I'm coming from. But I've come to understand that when you're the one that's hurting, and you're hurting because somebody has done something to you or made you feel a certain way, or your mind has interpreted what somebody did in a negative way, and you're struggling with that, and they ask you for forgiveness. What I've come to learn is that that person that is asking for forgiveness is hurting, if not equally as much as you, they might be hurting more. And it is a beautiful process. Listen to me when I say this, because I'm struggling to say this without breaking down and crying, because y'all know I will. But when somebody's hurting and they've done something to hurt you, if you can find it in you in that moment to hold tight to the Most High and forgive them, things will happen to you that you cannot imagine. It's not like the magic that you see on TV. You're not going to be flying around or anything like it. It's something that happens to your spirit. It's almost like it wakes up and it kicks you. Like, have you ever put your hand on a pregnant woman's belly and the little child inside of her kicks? That is probably one of the most beautiful things in life, to touch somebody's stomach and feel life growing inside of them when they kick. It amazes me when I was able to do that. You know what I'm saying? Back in the day, before my sons were born. I used to love doing that, or laying my head on her stomach and try to hear them inside her, listen to what's going on. But I couldn't hear nothing. But it was just an amazing experience. And that's kind of like what it feels like when you're hurting and you forgive somebody. It's like that kick. It's like your spirit just gives you that kick, that burst of energy. And it lets you know that even though you're hurting, you just became stronger. You just became wiser. You just did something that very few people do. You loved through your pain. Think about that. Learning to love somebody through the pain that they've caused you is an amazing experience. It's an amazing experience. And you can't do that if you're like LEROY, harboring resentment towards somebody else that was involved in the pain that was caused to you. So he told her, he got up and he told her that, he had to leave. And she asked him to stay. And he said he wasn't ready for that. And she did what a lot of women would do. She said, is there somebody else? She just wanted to know. She wasn't jealous. She just wanted to know. And he told her, he said, no, there's nobody else for me but you. And she said, well, why don't you stay? And he said, I'm not ready yet. There's something that I have to do. And she begged him, whatever it is, if it's going to cause him to be away from her longer than necessary, to not do it. And he told her that it wouldn't. He told her that he would not be that much longer. And she looked at him and she said, I love you. And he looked back at her and he said, and I love you too. So she stood up and she reached out and she grabbed his hand. And they walked towards one another and they kissed. And after they kissed, she cried, because she never thought that she would be able to do that again. And then he walked away. He went and got in his car and he went back to his apartment, and he continued to plot Big Al's downfall. What was he going to do to get him? He knows that Big Al loves his money, but one thing more than that, Big Al likes to be the center of attention. On the surface, Big Al appeared to be this guy that had everything under control. But beneath, he knew exactly what Big Al was. He had seen it in the penitentiary. He was another drug dealer that was insecure, that had found strength in making other people weak. And he was going to reverse that. He was going to make Big Al weak. He knew at that moment what he was going to do. He was going to turn Big Al into a junkie. Look here, y'all. Check me out tomorrow on the next episode, and you're going to be amazed at how this plot comes together. I'm telling you, this story is one for the books, y'all. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.
I've been trying to breathe underwater.